Good morning. This is April 4th, 2022 with a market update from FS Grain. I'm Brian Dallum. I'm going to jump right into the main headlines that we've all been following here for going on 4.5 to 5 weeks now, which really is hard to believe if you stop and think about it. Really, this war or this invasion from Russia into Ukraine has affected obviously all the financial markets, commodity markets, world markets in general, logistics, everything. But I thought there was a really good article on the Farm Week here about 10 days ago where they kind of illustrated specifically to the ag side of the equation why we're seeing such violent reactions in the ag markets. When you really key into some of the things on this really simple built picture here of map, you can see that Russia accounts for about 20% of world wheat supply. And also you'll notice, which we see every time we talk to our local agronomists, anhydrous ammonia. 21% of the world's supply of anhydrous is coming out of Russia. 16% of urea, 20% of potash. When we include that with Belarus, it's nearly 40% of the world exports of potash come out of Belarus and Russian mines. Obviously a huge issue. I think probably going to be a bigger issue this coming fall than it is currently. And of course, natural gas, 16% of the world production coming from Russia. Certainly a bigger issue for Europe, as we've talked about in the past, in the United States. But again, when you affect one part of the supply in the world, it certainly will affect the rest of us no matter where we're at. And then if you go down there to Ukraine, again, 13% of the exports in the world on corn and 8% on wheat combined with Russia. That's nearly 27% of world wheat exports are coming from the Black Sea, from Russia and Ukraine. And obviously none of that supply is moving right now. So this is just a really good illustration reminding us of why this conflict in Eastern Europe is such an issue for the rest of the world as well. And again, if we look, as I had mentioned on there, natural gas certainly creeping back up to high levels again. Crude oil also rallying. You'll notice on the crude market, we kind of had a stiff drop here last week as the current administration in the United States talked about our strategic reserves and opening some of that up to help relieve some cost at the pump for the U.S. consumers in terms of gasoline. So that kind of dropped the crude market a little bit, but we've had a sharp rally here overnight and again this morning. A lot of that based on the fact that it feels like the world is going to continue or even up the ante a little bit on sanctions against Russia. Been a lot of disturbing images and stories coming out of Ukraine here over the last 72 hours. And I think it's prompting the different countries, certainly NATO, to look at ways they can increase the pressure via sanctions on Russia. So we're seeing that reflected in crude oil and natural gas markets today, with Russia being such a huge supplier. If the world can figure out, specifically Europe, can figure out how to function without that supply, it would deal a huge blow to Russia, since that's such a huge part of their income generator. But it would certainly kind of change the way the world supply is. So the energy markets are certainly reacting to that here this morning. Let's move on to wheat. I don't talk about wheat very often, but overnight I've got circled here. We had a gap higher trade in the wheat market. Part of that, or mostly all of that, is due to the fact that we had our first crop conditions report yesterday afternoon, and it pointed that wheat conditions are 36% poor to very poor and only 30% good to excellent. That 30% good to excellent is actually the second lowest on record since they've been recording and reporting this information on crop conditions. So the wheat market certainly rallying on the fact that we've had such a wet spring in places, coupled with the dry fall. So it's been a violent switch, but what that is really hurting the quality of the wheat crop. So we're going to watch that going forward. And again, you couple that with the issue that so much of the world wheat supply is already tied up in Ukraine and not moving at all. Any lowering of expectations on the U.S. wheat crop is certainly going to intensify those issues there. All right, let's real quick circle back to what everyone already knows about the last week, the 31st planting intentions report. Obviously a massively pivotal report every year, but more so even this year with the world supplies tightening and in the Eastern European conflict going on. The USDA printed corn acres at 89, just under 89.5 million acres, and beans almost 91 million acres. Now, if we can actually do that for beans, that would be a record acres planted. And also you'll notice wheat at 47.3. That's also a pretty elevated number on wheat. And I think if you delved farther into the record, the pages and pages and pages of that report, you would see that canola is up, cotton is up, wheat obviously is up. Everything is higher, with corn being the one loser there. And a lot of that being the fact that if we go back to this winter, the unknowns of what the cost of inputs were going to be. So certainly a huge shift, probably more so than what the market was expecting, which is why we saw the sharp rally that day on the corn market and beans dropping off. Now, what I've got over here on the right is a chart of the corn to bean ratio. So that is new crop corn versus new crop beans. Now that typically hovers around the 2.5, 2.5 mark. You can see we've been well below that, below 2.4 for most of the year. And at the report that I've got circled there, we dropped her all the way down to almost 2.0. So really what that says is the market is encouraging and looking for more corn acres. 89.5 is probably not enough. So the market's trying to make that switch. The real question is, can the farmer, or I guess, is the farmer willing to pay the high price for corn fertilizer and nitrogen, or can he even get it? That seems to be the real question, which we're going to find out here over the next 30 to 40 days as we slowly dry out and begin planting progress in the states. But certainly a bit of a curveball, a bit of a surprise, and kind of sets the stage for where the market would be going forward. So let's look at the corn market here specifically. Old crop corn and May futures were sharply higher again today. A lot of that based on last week's report, as well as the wheat market being so much stronger here today. Not at new highs, but certainly approaching them again, to be above that 760 range up to 780. It feels like we're going to be somewhere locked into this for a little while. But again, a lot of this is going to start to, the entire market is going to start to flip to a weather market mindset. We've seen our planning projections here. We've got that under our belts. Now it's all going to be about the weather. And again, as you look over on the right at December new crop corn, you can see that we've also set new highs there. So new highs, again, much of that, which you can see that sharp rally the day of the report, much of this is due to the fact that the acres, the projected acres, are well below expectations. So again, it will, we know what that number is, and it's going to be all about the weather going forward here. And I will note that the southern Delta states, which are not a massive contributor to corn, but still do plant quite a bit of corn, while we are currently on the 5-year average pace, they've been getting hammered with rains down there, with more to come. So I think we'll see the overall planting pace probably slow next week and maybe the week after. And I think that is playing a little bit into the market movement here this morning. If we switch over to the bean complex, I just got some simple charts here on soybean meal on the left, or excuse me, on the right, and soybean oil on the left. Both of them rallying a bit here today. Beans fell off sharply during the report, but I think we've made a decent move back here. That ratio of 2.0 is certainly encouraging corn acres, but the reality is we're not overflowing with beans in the world supply either. So while the U.S. is looking for more corn, we really don't have a whole lot of room to remove a ton of acres from beans. So the entire bean complex we're seeing move higher. And then you got to remember that that's tied in with the other vegetable oil markets. Canola continues to be at all-time highs. So as these outside vegetable oil markets stay strong, soybeans oil, is certainly in that mix and will be affected as so. If we look at bean futures on their own here, we saw the big drop here, obviously, during the report last week, but rallying overnight and yesterday a little bit higher. So that's a good move here. Again, like I said, we really don't have a ton of room in soybeans to see them fall off. Even if we plant a record amount of acres, there's still good demand in the world. So we're going to kind of keep an eye on what that demand versus supply, really looks like over the next 30, 45 days as we see planting progress move along. So I guess I'll leave that with the fact that today is April 4th. Obviously, pretty early in our neck of the woods to start planting. I believe there was some work and some beans planted around April 6th last year. I don't think we're going to see that this year. It's pretty wet and cold out there. I wasn't even sure I wanted to post a picture like this because it certainly brings back our terrible memories of 2019. And as we know, a lot can change in a hurry. It looks like there's some warm weather coming on the weekend. So I guess my point is be patient. We have a high value crop out there. We want to make sure we get it planted in the best conditions possible. So let's all wait for Mother Nature to lend us a hand and keep things moving as we go forward here. But when you do get in that tractor, folks, as always, please be safe. Please make sure that safety is always the forefront of our minds as we move forward, as we always think about our customers and hope for them to be safe every year. That's been another market update for FS Grain. I'm Brian Dallum. Thanks again, guys. We'll talk to you later.